Okay, so are you ready for this? Today we're diving deep into something I bet you'd never guess. We're talking Costco, gold buying. You heard that right.
Hmm.
Costco, gold, our source.
Hmm.
A YouTube video by this, enthusiastic collector, Spegtacular. And this guy, he's over the moon about the gold deals he snagged at Costco.
Oh, yeah, it's a pretty wild combo, right? Like you think Costco, you think bulk toilet paper, maybe a giant rotisserie chicken, not exactly precious metals.
So,
But Spectacular's video kind of opens up this whole rabbit hole of like weird economic trends and just how people are spending their money these days.
totally. And the thing is, he's genuinely confused, like baffled by all the hate he sees online about buying gold at Costco. The guy's found some seriously good prices, like even beating out those fancy gold dealers. And he doesn't get why people are so against it, you know?
Well, I think some of that pushback might be because people don't really get how Costco works, like their whole business model. They're huge EE, right? So they've got this insane buying power. They can basically squeeze suppliers to get crazy low prices. And then on top of that, they're famous for those like super low markups. Their whole thing is giving their members a good deal. So yeah, they can actually offer prices that are way lower than you'd find anywhere else, even for something like gold.
And spectacular. He's all about wringing every last bit of value out of that system.
Mm.
He's got this whole cashback strategy he calls cheating the system, which, okay, maybe a bit dramatic. But basically, he uses his Costco executive membership and their credit card to get, wait for it, 4% back on every gold purchase.
Yeah.
A fewer percent. He even said he almost hit his cashback limit. Kind of impressive, honestly.
Oh, totally. Shows you how those reward programs can really add up, especially when you're dropping serious cash. But I gotta say, it's important for anyone listening to remember that those programs, they can change. Like Costco could totally tweak the cashback, add new rules, even just scrap the whole thing. If your whole strategy hinges on one specific reward, it might not work forever.
Right, that's a good point. But it's not just about the money for spectacular. Like, he truly believes in gold as an investment,
Mhm.
especially now when things are kind of shaky, economically speaking. He sees it as a way to, like, protect what he's earned.
Yeah, and that's not some crazy new idea. Historically, gold's been seen as this like safe haven asset, meaning when the economy goes wonky, gold tends to hold its value. Makes sense, right? It's a finite resource.
Yeah.
And its value isn't tied to some specific currency or the stock market doing its whole roller coaster thing.
So basically, when the world freaks out, people run to gold like it's a warm blanket.
Pretty much. It's a hedge against inflation, too. You know how everything keeps getting more expensive? Well, that means your regular money buys less stuff. But gold's tangible, right? It's got this like intrinsic value, so its buying power tends to stay more stable.
Makes sense. But okay, so Spectacular has a name for all the people who are like raining on his Costco gold parade. He calls them negative Nancy's. He jokes that maybe they're just jealous because they didn't find the deals he did. But like, I don't know, is there maybe something more to it?
I think it's worth talking about how like psychology plays into this whole investing thing cuz money can be emotional.
For sure. But like, what kind of emotions are we talking about here?
Well, FOMO is a big one. Fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Like we see Spectacular all stoked about his Costco gold and suddenly we're like, "Wait, am I missing out on something? We
Yeah.
got to get in on that action."
Right, right. We see him winning and we don't want to be left behind.
Exactly. And then there's that whole feeling of like being a super smart investor, like you outsmarted the system, found the secret way to be financially awesome, which, let's face it, sounds extra tempting when it's something kind of out there, like buying gold at like a bulk store.
So you're saying maybe Spectacular's haters are just like kind of bummed they didn't think of it first?
I mean, it's possible. It's a good reminder that with money stuff, there are almost always these like hidden emotional reasons why we react the way we do.
That's kind of wild when you think about it. So we've got Costco's business model, the history of gold as this like investment haven, and now we're throwing psychology into the mix. And all this just because someone's buying gold at Costco. But okay, no deep dive into Spectacular's world would be complete without mentioning this little side quest he went on. We got to talk about the praying mantis eggs.
Oh, yeah, the Mantis saga. That was a curveball.
So apparently he's up late doing some online shopping, as you do, and somehow he ends up with a container of praying mantis eggs. And now he's got these eggs that won't even hatch for months. He's calling himself a praying mantis father. Like, how do you even explain that purchase to anyone?
Oh, man. That's like impulse buying in its purest form.
Yeah. Especially in this age of like online shopping where everything is just a click away. Those websites, they're designed to make you buy, even if you don't need it.
It's like the digital version of those candy bars at the checkout, just begging you to throw them in the cart.
Totally. And, it all ties back into what we've been saying about, like, how we make decisions about money, the psychology behind it all. Whether you're buying gold bars or praying mantis eggs, those emotions, they can sneak in and influence what we do.
It's amazing how, like, even a random story like that can connect back to the bigger picture. So I love deep dives. Okay, so we've covered Costco, gold, negative Nancy's, and now praying mantises. What's next? Well, I think it's time to really dissect Spegtacular's gold buying strategy.
Yeah.
Like, is it really as sustainable as he thinks? Are there risks he's not seeing? Let's unpack all that and see if there are some like useful takeaways for our listeners. Okay, so let's like play devil's advocate a little bit, you know. Spegtacular is super pumped about all this, but we got to look at his strategy with a critical eye.
Yeah, true. We can't just take his word as gospel, right? So what are some things our listeners should be thinking about when they're, like, evaluating his whole approach?
Well, first off, he's putting a lot of faith in Costco's cashback program, which, like we said before, could change at any moment. Costco could be like, oh, hey, cashback is now 1%, sorry. Or put limits on it. Or just get rid of it completely. That would kind of wreck his whole plan.
So that 4% return might sound amazing right now, but it might not be there forever.
Exactly. You always got to factor in that uncertainty, you know? Another thing to think about is how much the price of gold can jump around. Spegtacular talks about getting gold way cheaper than the spot price. But, like, what even is that?
Ooh, good question. I'm not sure I totally get it either, to be honest. Can you break it down for our listeners, like what that even means?
Sure. So the spot price is basically what gold is going for right this second, like if you wanted to buy it and have it delivered immediately. But it changes all the time, up and down, depending on like global supply and demand, what's happening in the economy, all sorts of stuff.
Okay, so when Spectacular says he's getting gold for like $80 under Scott, that means he's paying less than what everyone else is paying. But how's that possible?
Probably Costco's bulk buying power, right? Like they buy so much gold, they can get it at a lower price than us regular folks or even smaller stores. Plus, you know, they have their whole membership thing and low markups, so they can basically pass those savings on to their members.
So it's not like Costco's running some secret gold discount. It's just like how their whole business works allows them to give good prices.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Even though buying below spot price seems awesome, remember, the spot price can go down too. There's no guarantee that gold will stay high enough for Spegtacular to make money in the long run.
Oh, so if the price tanks, he could end up with gold that's worth less than what he paid.
Yep, that's the risk with any kind of gold investment, no matter where you buy it. It just shows why it's so important to do your research, understand how the gold market works, and have a plan before you jump in head first.
It also makes you wonder if Spectacular is factoring in all the other costs that come with owning gold, right? Like you got to store it somewhere safe, maybe you need insurance, and then there are taxes if you make a profit.
All super important points. It's easy to get caught up in finding a good deal and forget about those extra expenses, but they can really eat into your profits, so you can't ignore them.
Okay, so it sounds like there's more to Spectacular's strategy than meets the eye. He might be getting a good deal on the gold itself, but are there these hidden costs or risks he's maybe not thinking about?
That's the question everyone needs to ask themselves. We've pointed out some potential problems, but honestly, the best thing is to do your own research, talk to a financial expert, you know, before you make any big investment decision.
Right, the Spectacular's video is super interesting, but it's just one guy's experience. People need to weigh the pros and cons and decide what's right for them based on their own situation and how much risk they're comfortable with.
100%. And remember, don't just blindly believe everything you see online, even if it sounds really convincing. Always think critically, especially when it comes to your money.
It's interesting, though, how Spectacular talks about buying gold as a way to, like, win in this crazy economy. What do you think he means by that?
I think it's tapping into this feeling that a lot of people have right now, like this need for security, for control, when everything feels so uncertain, you know, prices are going up, the economy is kind of unpredictable, and it seems like the old ways of doing things aren't working anymore. And gold,
Yeah.
it's always been associated with wealth and stability, right? So it feels like this solid thing you can hold on to when everything else is shaky.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, forget keeping up with the Joneses. I'm going to put my money in something real, something the government or banks can't mess with.
There's definitely some of that going on. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that whole safe haven idea. People are drawn to gold because they think it'll hold its value when times are tough.
But is that always true? I mean, we just talked about how the price can be volatile. Is gold really this guaranteed path to financial security?
That's a great question, and honestly, it's one that people have been arguing about forever. There's no easy answer. Gold has done well historically when things are bad, but there's no promise that'll always be the case. And like we said, there are risks and costs involved with investing in gold. You can't just ignore those.
So even though Spectacular's excitement about gold makes sense, our listeners got to be realistic. Look at the potential downsides, not just the good stuff.
For sure. And remember, what winning with your money means is different for everyone. For some people, it's about having enough to retire early. For others, it's just having enough to pay the bills and live comfortably. There's no one definition.
Which is why it's so important to figure out what your own goals are, make a plan that works for you, instead of just copying what someone else is doing.
Absolutely. Knowing about money and being honest with yourself about what you want is super important, especially these days when things are so complicated.
Okay, so where do we go from here? We've talked about, like, everything from Costco's business to the psychology of investing, from how much the price of gold can change to this idea of winning with your money. It's a lot to take in.
Well, I think the big thing to remember is that there's no magic formula. What works for spectacular might be a total disaster for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime you're looking at an investment, especially one that's like kind of outside the box, you got to really think it through.
Right, like he's super focused on those cashback rewards, those short-term gains. But like you were saying, those can disappear, and then what? You got to think about the long game too, right? Like what if the price of gold goes down?
Yeah.
Or all those extra costs start adding up?
Exactly. A smart investment strategy, it's got to work for both the short term and the long term. It's about finding that balance between getting a quick return and making sure you're not going to get screwed down the road.
And that's where doing your homework comes in, right?
Yeah.
Like really understanding how things work, maybe even talking to a financial advisor before you go throwing your money around.
Totally. Look, even people who seem like they know what they're doing, they might not have the full picture. What worked for them might not work for you.
It's like that saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Whether it's information or investments, you got to spread things out.
Smart move for sure. Build a portfolio that fits your situation, how much risk you can handle, and what you want to achieve in the long run. That might mean a mix of regular investments, some alternative stuff, and hey, maybe even some Costco gold, if it makes sense for you.
Man, this deep dive has been wild. We started with a YouTube video about buying gold at Costco and ended up talking about everything, like the global economy and how our brains work.
Yeah. It's crazy how all these different things are connected, right? Just goes to show that it's always good to be curious and dig a little deeper.
And speaking of digging deeper, I can't resist bringing up the praying mantis eggs one last time. What does that whole thing tell us about how Spectacular makes decisions, do you think?
I think it shows he's a bit of a risk taker, right? He's not afraid to jump on a deal, whether it's gold at a bulk store or like a late night online impulse buy for insect eggs.
I love it. It reminds us that sometimes the best lessons come from the most unexpected places.
For sure. And it shows that personal finance, it's not just about numbers and spreadsheets. It's about understanding yourself, knowing what you're comfortable with, and figuring out what really matters to you when it comes to money.
And for Spectacular, that seemed to be a mix of finding good deals, getting his hands on something real like gold, and just being open to whatever comes his way, even if it's a bunch of baby praying mantises.
It's definitely his own unique path. And hey, maybe it'll inspire some of our listeners, even if they end up doing things differently.
It all comes back to that question Spectacular asked, right? What does winning mean to you? Is it about having a ton of money, feeling secure, or just enjoying the ride?
It's up to each person to decide, and I think that's a really powerful message. Define success for yourself and make a plan that fits your values and what you want to achieve.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Costco Gold and the mind of Spectacular, remember, your journey with money is your own. Stay curious, do your research, and don't be afraid to try something new, even if it leads you to some unexpected places.
And who knows, maybe you'll find your own definition of winning along the way.